We're just going live on YouTube. We'll just take a few seconds. We should be good.
With that, let's call the meeting of the City of Scranton Ethics Board on Wednesday, February 10th, 2021. It's right now, it's 6 o'clock on the dot. Let's call this meeting to order and move to the second agenda item, which is roll call. And I'll just begin by saying Matt Meyer, my name is indicating present.
Stephanie Bressler.
Andy Heller.
Brad Kovaleski.
And John Hart, Solicitor.
Great, thank you very much. We move to the third agenda item, which is reading and approval of the minutes of the January 14th, 2021 meeting. If I could get a motion to perhaps bypass the reading and approve those minutes, that would be appreciated.
I'll make that motion.
I'll second. I'll second.
Thank you. All in favor of the motion?
Aye.
Aye. Stephanie, just to clarify, I do vote on this, right? Or can vote? I assume
Yes.
I can.
Mhm.
Yes. Great. So we're moving right along to the fourth item, which is the solicitor's update on pending complaint, appointment of investigative officer, and perhaps some other business as well. John, that's you.
Certainly. Okay, so I had an opportunity to reach out to our investigative officer for our initial complaint. I sent an email yesterday requesting an update, and he timely got back to me with correspondence. It looks like there's nothing new to report since our last meeting. Let me pull up his correspondence. He essentially indicated exactly what he had stated last meeting. He had already contacted the complainant in that matter, as well as the subject, I believe. He has been, he did make a finding that it is within the board's jurisdiction, and he's already commenced his investigation. I just asked that he keep us abreast to what's going on procedurally. Of course, nothing regarding substance of the investigation, and it seems like we have it in good hands. At least he seems to be doing everything he has to do in accordance with the code.
Can I ask about an expected timeline on that? So will we have?
He has 60 days to complete that and I believe he commenced that on December 31st, as soon as he was retroactively appointed, so to speak.
So we're looking at the beginning of March at the latest, right?
Correct. Yep. And that is just his preliminary investigation in accordance with the code.
Okay. Thank you. Questions?
I also see that. Oh, go ahead.
Go ahead. Yeah, either way. I was going to say questions about that for the other board members. If they have any.
I don't have a question about that, but I was just wondering if Attorney Davis has been in contact with the controller's office and now has possession of the key so that she can monitor the post office box.
I don't know if she's contacted the controller's office. I did have an opportunity to speak with her since last meeting, and said we basically affirmed her suggestion that she would be in charge with checking the box. So she did confirm that with me. I don't know if she's actually had the opportunity or if she has the key. I can look into that though.
Other questions about this? Attorney Hart, I think you had further things to.
I just noticed the next thing you have on the agenda is the appointment of investigative officer. I'm not sure if that was to follow up with our last month's meeting about potentially a third individual as well to put into our, so to speak, roster. I have not had an opportunity to find a third person yet. I do have a board meeting next week with the Young Lawyers Division of Lackawanna County, so I think that'll give me an opportunity to try and reach out to other people. It's a little difficult, obviously, given the adversity to being around other people.
Yeah.
But that'll be that'll be a Zoom meeting as well, so I can send out some feelers.
Any questions on that from board members? Great. Then I think we can, unless I hear otherwise, move on to agenda item number 5, the finance report. Brad, this is from you.
All right, so we created a list of questions at our last meeting that we were just trying to find the answers to. They fell under the categories of budget parameter and managing expenses, solicitor and investigative expenses. So Stephanie pointed me in the direction, and as with everything Stephanie has shared with us, it was a great direction to be pointed in. So I was able to talk to a few different people within the city, and ultimately it landed with the business administrator. So I had a meeting this morning with Carl Deely, and we talked through some of the questions. So some of them we have an answer to, some of them he's going to explore, and I'll kind of tell you what that means. So we asked if there was a budget spreadsheet that could be shared with us, and he did say they'll be able to provide us with a regular. There isn't an electronic way to access that for us, but he can give us a budget report as often as we would like it. So if we determine how often we would like to see that number, we can. I asked what the dollar amount was, and it was $10,000. $10,000 was allotted for this fiscal year. I talked to him a little bit about how it was originally $25,000, then it went down because it wasn't expended, but it wasn't expended because it was a new board that was finding its footing. And so we talked about the budget in general and what that means if we come close to our threshold. And he said that's something for us to not, I don't want to put words in his mouth, but it's not something that should make us nervous to approach that threshold, because this is the first time we're going through this process formally. So what needs to happen is we need to be aware of how our budget expenses are going, how we're approaching that threshold, and what we might need extra. And what happens is they'll have to do some internal budget transfers, but in order for that to take place, council has to approve it. So they will need lead time for that. So as we look to outline what our year might look like, or if we're already aware of some areas where we might be approaching that 10,000 threshold, which through some of our conversations last time, we probably need to kind of flesh through this a little bit, because that dollar amount will go quickly. He said he's more than willing to have an open conversation to work through that and see what they can do with the city, with the council, to make sure it's managed. So
ultimately, the city council would be responsible for, or the place that would decide whether we could expand the budget.
Yeah. So what I quickly understood, and I don't know if I'm getting all of it, is the administration will be our kind of person power to kind of help us navigate and make the changes that need to happen. They formalize it through sharing it with council, who then passes it or edits it through their motions at the council meeting. So it has, and I don't know if it has to go through the business administrator's office then to council, but it looks as though that's our best path at this point, but it doesn't mean we can't explore, is there a direct line to the council as well? And Carl was working through that conversation with me, and he said he's open to working however we want to work through that process too. So he was very accommodating.
He's a pretty good gentleman. I like him.
Yeah, he was very helpful, and he read through the ethics code legislation to kind of have a better understanding when we got there, and he kind of walked me through some things too and highlighted it for me, so it was helpful on both parts. Excuse me. The expenses will go through his area. He said he'd happily be the funnel for any invoices, whether they be for our solicitor expenses, our investigator expenses, and our bills, to be processed through his area. And I kind of said we were going through Denise, right? Is that who we went through before? So we need to work through that basically. Right now, there is no flow chart, no process flow for how that's going to happen because we are new. So we need to create what that is. And he said he's happy to be the processor, or if there's an alternative, they can go that way as well. So that's something we'll have to work through. And there is a line item for the expenses, and the solicitor, the investigations, and any ads that might be in there. Let me see here. Asked about how other boards are handling solicitors, and he was going to do some outreach within our city, but then he has a group of business administrators for similar size city institutions that he was going to talk with. So mentioned Lancaster, York, he mentioned some of those where they get together bi-weekly, where they're going to kind of share some best practices of how they handle their board structures and solicitor payments and billing. I asked what kind of information would he need on an invoice should that be the path we chose, and he said as simple as a description of the services rendered is all that would be needed attached to the invoice. I talked to him a little bit about the salary versus invoice, and he said that's kind of a board decision. We'll need to operate within our budgeting. Invoicing seems to be what's he understood was happening, but he again didn't have us. There is not a solid answer because this is a new group, so that we kind of came to that understanding with a lot of the questions. And then I think that was the last piece of our questions we had. Let me look through one more time here. He was the last piece was he was going to reach out to the council's office in the city. I don't know if that's the official department name, to get their input for how other boards might be doing their solicitors. And then he is also going to, and I said I would talk to this group when he speaks with the other cities and he talks to some people within the department. He wanted to know who to be the liaison with. And I said I would bring that back to this group because I didn't know if Matt wanted to be, so say the ethics board for a separate city wanted to have a conversation about best practices or sharing. I didn't know who from our group would be that conduit to have that conversation with them. And he said that may or may not happen, but it's just, if we are interested in having a connection to other boards that exist in the state, he'd happily facilitate it if possible.
If that were to happen, I'd be happy to do it.
Okay.
But maybe we can just get some sort of report. In my view, is just have some overview of a reasonable range of best practices, and we can decide what we think is best from there. So.
And I explained to him that our current budget allotment versus our anticipated expenses are in disalignment. And so that we wouldn't be needing to have a conversation about that. And he was open to that conversation. So.
And
where does the solicitor's salary come from?
His understanding was it all comes from that budget line.
Then we're way out of line already.
Yeah.
Mm-hmm. So
is that something we have to approach him now to head off so we don't have a problem with Attorney Hart salary?
I had that conversation with him and explained that our current anticipated expenses outweigh our current budget allotment. And he said for us to kind of gather our numbers and then have that conversation, because what'll have to happen is what I said previously is like, we'll need to ask for an adjustment in the allocation. The city has to apply for the allocation through council. That's probably not the right language. Apply. I don't know what the word is, but not apply for it. And then the council has to approve it or amend it. So yeah, we need to do something. I just don't know if we even have enough details right now with the anticipated potential investigator expenses, ad expenses, solicitor expenses. I think I'll need to do some legwork to do some estimates to maybe present at our next meeting before I share with him.
We can get
Hart,
correct, and we could also get approximate hours for investigative officer. And then we know an ad in the paper costs basically.
Yeah.
So we can get some fairly decent numbers, I would think.
Yeah, I think as of right now, it might be difficult to come up with an estimate as to how much work the investigative officer is going to undertake since it's their very first complaint. I think we'll just have to work from that after that one comes to completion.
I guess I have two general, one's the most general question. So we kind of have three expenses, is that correct? Kind of the advertising and the, I guess I'd put it under that, some version of that publicity. And then the solicitor expense, salary, but then the investigative officers, depending on, is that correct? Or are there other expenses in addition to that?
That's how I framed it to him, was those were the three expenses that I knew of. I said there may be, I don't know if we do anything with ECTV. I don't know if there are other nominal expenses that exist, but those are the three that I knew of.
Three categories are general.
Yeah.
Stephanie, do you know of other expenses, or Andy?
No, I don't, but I was just wondering if this investigation goes into from the preliminary into the next step, you know, will there be a point at which there will be other expenses other than the investigative officer?
I was going to speak up to that effect because, after assuming that some matter, a complaint, moves on to a full investigation, and then after that, the investigative officer issues a findings report, and that individual, the subject, wants to request a hearing in front of the board, that basically flags two more attorneys that have to be appointed for that hearing. It's it could become quite costly.
Yes.
But yeah.
So with that, are there constraints, Attorney Hart, or guidelines for the amount of hours that attorney would or should, I guess, billable hours, devote to a particular case? Or is it just as the attorney sees, or the investigative officer sees fit? I mean, that might be the best way, but I'm just wondering.
Right. Well, as an attorney who's doing billable hours, they do have to itemize what they're doing. And as far as, you would only raise scrutiny if it didn't seem reasonable. So I guess we really wouldn't be able to have a full understanding until it's come to its conclusion for the first matter.
I asked a similar question about for the solicitor. So aside from the investigator, about the solicitor's charges, and I said, is there something we should be looking for, any parameters that would be in there? And from my reading, and then I asked Carl's interpretation too, it doesn't look as though there are parameters provided. So it's almost as if we would have to create working guidelines after we see how this plays out. I do think, Attorney Hart, it might be like our due diligence would be to have the continual contact with the attorneys doing the investigation, reminding them, this is a public service opportunity where, those type of things, making sure that, and I'm confident that they are, but doing our due diligence to make sure we keep that on the forefront. And then we need to come up with some process ourselves after we see how this plays out. What will be our, if it goes to 60 hours, that could just simply be because it's that convoluted of a case. Like they might need to put that time and energy.
Yeah.
And how do we make sure that there's finances and support to justify that when we get to the place where we have to process?
Right. And I think I'd mentioned at the last hearing, or maybe the one at the end of December, obviously we're new, and I'm only going off of what similar situated counties have done in the past. And I've reviewed Reading's minutes, agendas, and their advisory opinions, their findings reports, things like that, just to come up with some type of estimate. And I mean, to this day, I know that, they're having issues that I'm pretty sure I mentioned this regarding subpoena power. And another question that came up is, after the investigative officer reviews a complaint, well, he started seeing that there were issues that were implicating somebody else. And that the question was, well, are we allowed to go after that person? And that's up to the board to make that determination. I believe they did, saying, if it seems to stem directly from the initial issue in that complaint, then yes, you can't just have your ability to just go out and use your own discretion as the investigative officer to go after anybody. But it obviously, it does require a lot of legwork, I would say, for an investigative officer. So how much, I'm not sure yet, but I know that it does require them to go out and, it's a full-on investigation, and more than a police officer. They have to interview witnesses to see whether or not it even rises to the level of being an issue. I think this is it's going to be a learning process. So, we'll have the ability, since it is billable hours for them, we'll have the ability to review and see, okay, well, what did this entail? What do they have to do?
Yeah, my concern is not so much billable hours being reported that aren't actually billable hours. My concern is there's legitimate billable hours, but then that we make sure at the city level that they know that if a very complicated, significant case comes forward, that we could be asking well over our budget, and that they're prepared to have some sort of contingency plan or process by which it's made known that we So rather than just getting a bill and then we find out we can't, that the city.
It sounds like Brad already.
Yeah.
Yep.
So
Yeah,
that-
I was going to say, I think I had a nice entry level conversation that, but Matt, it might be worth, while I'm having this kind of conversation with Carl and kind of doing some investigative work on my own, it might be positive for you to have a conversation with the mayor and the council
I was
president.
thinking about that. Yes.
Yeah. Because then that'll at least get their perspective on, say, hey, here's where we're at. Here's some flags we're seeing already as far as how we're moving forward and how our expenses are starting to come forward. What is your guidance as because we don't want to have someone doing this work and then us not be able to pay them, you know?
So Brad, I had that thought before, and since you had that thought independently of my thought, I think it might be a good thought. So I think it's something that I should at least reach out and see if they're interested in having that kind of conversation, and that might be a productive avenue. So I will plan on doing that between now and our next meeting. And Attorney Hart, one other point of clarification. Right now, we are on the invoice. We are doing this by invoice with you currently, correct? So you will be invoicing.
Yes, that's correct. Because I believe that when I was appointed last year, my contract, my fee agreement went into effect April 1st, I believe. So while I was already reappointed for this year, I figured this gives us time to clarify and fix anything.
Yep, you're still on that fee agreement and that contract. Okay.
Yeah. Yep.
Great.
Fine with that.
Thank you, Brad. Are there other any other points, Brad, that you'd like to make or questions from the other members for Brad on this?
No, that's all I have from my notes. The difficult part will be us kind of creating a preliminary budget that we think, because we at our current rate we're going to exceed the allotment, so we're going to need to come up with plans for requesting transfers, or you know, part of your conversation, Matt, with those folks might be what are some internal mechanisms that might help us eliminate some costs. You know, when I think of ethics reviews and complaint reviews, I need to get a better understanding as far as what types of complaints are submitted for investigators externally versus what ones do we have internal processes to handle, and is there a difference between the two, or is there all go external? I think that might be something that human resources within might have some ability to have jurisdiction on, but I'm not sure how it falls within the code. So
Yeah, and I can't imagine how it's going to be to create some type of preliminary budget when there's so much unknown. I mean, you know, this year, right? Technically, last year we had one complaint, whereas this year it could be 10, it could be 20, it could be 1. You know, it's a huge discrepancy.
Yeah, to some degree, that's why I'm thinking, is there a way of like an auxiliary fund, or just so they know that, I mean, you could have 25 complaints in a year, and another year you could have 1. And at what point do they then, would we say, there's a limit? We can't investigate anymore because we've had our 15 complaints that used up X amount of hours and X amount of, is that a possibility? And just even thinking through those, I don't know if we'll reach that, but it's just something to think.
And just logically thinking, this is the first time we're doing this, so the likelihood that something comes up now is probably high, because if there was no avenue to report previously, now there is an avenue. We're going to have people who might have been waiting years to report, you know, who knows? So there's a chance we could have a spike within the first 3 years, because people are seeing, one, that it's a legitimate process, they'll see it work, and it will build some trust within the employee base for them to participate in this process.
Great. Other comments or questions? Or okay. With that, I think we move to item number 6. Some other business with elections update and letter to candidates and website. And also, I think we have a new member that Stephanie, and this is kind of under Stephanie's purview. Go ahead and take it away. Yeah.
The City Council is filling the second City Council vacancy, and introduced the resolution last night, and we'll vote again next Tuesday. And David Falchuk will be appointed to our board effective February 17th. So that will be next Wednesday. I've been in touch with him. I invited him to meet with us tonight. Unfortunately, he had a conflict and was sorry he couldn't meet with us. But we will include him in the next meeting.
Yes.
So it will be the first time for a while that we have had a complement full board. So that's
Maybe forever, maybe from the beginning.
Oh, well, that's excellent news.
yeah, it is really good news.
Thank you, Stephanie. Any questions from anybody on that? So, okay, great. Next.
Elections update and letter to candidates. And at the last meeting, we talked about the upcoming municipal elections and the requirements set forth by the Code of Ethics. I did contact Lackawanna County Department of Elections, and they have decided that they will put a note in the candidate packets, the packets that candidates pick up who are planning to run for city elected office. And in addition, they will send us a list of all candidates for city elected office after petitions have been filed. So petitions will be filed. The deadline, I think, is March 9th. There is a period after that where the petitions can be challenged, but we will have those names. I did draft a letter that Matt circulated, and we should decide whether that's the letter we send, whether it should be revised, if there's another way to contact the candidates. And these are only candidates for Scranton elected office. So that would be the mayor, county, city council. I don't think the controller is up for election in this municipal election. I don't know, but the controller certainly would be included. I do have a question for Attorney Hart. Is the Scranton single tax collector's office considered a Scranton elected office?
I don't believe so, no. Let me, hold on. That I'll confirm for you. But I don't believe we've ever had to, then again, we're just this year. I will find out for you.
Okay, thanks. I did notice that that office was included in the city budget, which is why I raised the question.
Okay.
So again, there will be a note in the candidates packet that they receive from the County Department of Elections notifying them of the requirements. It could very well be the document that we developed last year. And then we will have a list and we can decide if we will send a letter, and we have a draft of a letter.
Yeah, so we should focus on the letter, I think. Right, Stephanie? We should kind of ask whether that's something, as we have a draft before us, there are modifications to the draft or suggestions, or does the draft look like something that we can use? I mean, the draft looks good to me. Thank you, Stephanie, for putting that together. Brad and Andy, how do you feel about the?
I reviewed it, looks good to me.
Yeah, I thought it looked great. Thanks, Stephanie. My only question I had, and I don't think it needs to be in the letter, so this might be next conversation, is what happens if someone's in violation of this process? And we're doing our due diligence to get it in front of them. So that's next. But this one, I thought the letter was great. I think it outlined expectations clearly, very simple to follow. And I think it's a perfect kind of cover sheet so they know what they have to do.
So I'm not sure. Clearly, if there is a violation that someone knows of and files a complaint with us, that's one way we would know it. But because the candidates must must file copies with the city clerk of any other reports that are required by the Department of Elections, we can check with the city clerk to see if those documents have been filed there. So we could be assertive on this and check. I'm not really sure. Or do we wait to see if there's a complaint?
Yes. Yeah, that raises a question, perhaps, the question, it seems to me, and correct me if I'm wrong, is about, the difference between kind of policing and adjudication. So are we responsible for going out and controlling and making sure that these things are in conformity with the ethics code? Or do we sit back and wait for people to point out, some other office or individual citizens point out discrepancies or failures to adhere to the code? And then have that, certainly it seems clear to me, and correct me if I'm wrong, that would be then fall under our purview to determine whether a code was violated. But the question seems to be how much we're actively policing, so to speak, or checking on these matters. Is that a correct understanding of the question? And then we need to come up, if it is, then we need to come up with an answer to the question.
Right. Yes, that is what I was asking.
Yeah. So what's the answer? Do we know?
That is up to us to make that determination. If we want to be proactive in seeking out to make sure that everybody's in compliance with the code, or if you want to be less active and sit back. But I think that the code would allow us to do either. And we already took the first step to give advice by giving that letter. So, right now we've already left it up to people to understand that they have requirements that they have to meet.
Mm-hmm. And if we were not to kind of engage in checking that there's compliance, then is there somebody out there that would be doing it at least incidentally as part of or would it just fall by the wayside for individual citizens, or perhaps, somebody to just bring this up? Yeah.
That's where I think the conversation, well, and this will just be a low, I don't know the right word. This will be the start conversation as far as what do people already do? And then what do we want to happen? And then how do we fill that gap? Because I would be under the understanding that the Human Resources Office would handle ethical issues within the city, and there would be a report line, but I don't know if that exists. And if that doesn't exist, is that another conversation we have to have? There is an elections process that probably has guidelines and expectations and some type of oversight, but what is it?
Mm-hmm.
And do our expectations create a gap that needs to be filled? And then since we created the gap, do we need to fill the gap until we have the conversation with those other parties?
It's a great way. And also the other question would be, to fill that gap, if that somehow fell upon us, I mean, what kind of workload are we looking at?
Right.
Even if it doesn't fall on us, I mean, maybe, and we could also look for ways to place requests of some other, and I don't, I mean, this is an process of education for me. I don't know enough around to just know, oh, that office should do that or
Right.
couldn't do that. But those are some of the questions that we have to figure out. So we've identified the questions. I guess we're looking at answers. Yeah.
In reviewing the powers and duties of the code, particularly number 6, it says that it is to adopt rules and regulations to administer, implement, enforce, and interpret the code of ethics. So it's vague. So I guess the ball's in your court to see if you want to be proactive or if you want to just sit back and make sure that you educate the public about these rules and leave it up to them to make a determination if they want to bring forth a potential issue.
I just wanted to point out that this board, I was not on the board at the time. I think maybe Andy was. The board had just started and had not put all these documents together about the time just before the special election for the mayor, which would have been November 2019. And I don't know if Andy remembers that there was a newspaper article about someone who, a candidate, I think a candidate for mayor, who had not filed a report. And it was a big deal because it was in the newspaper. And I don't know how that information got there. But I think that's something we need to be concerned about, that if we do have these requirements and we've interpreted what they are and we've informed people about them, that if they don't follow through, then do we have a responsibility?
Yeah, that's great, Stephanie. Thank you. I'm starting to think that I'm going to be reaching out to the mayor and members or the head of the city council, that maybe this would be another part of that conversation, if that conversation were to occur.
I'm not sure, because I think we really need to be independent.
I see.
And they are all elected.
Yes, they're subject to these things. So in other words, I might be asking.
Right, but I do think there's a very high likelihood we're going to need city employee assistance in some capacity. So I think having conversations to kind of get an understanding of their expectation, or even just an initial conversation so the future conversations could take place. Because my thought process is, if we create these policies and give it, a motion and we approve it that X is to happen, there should be some type of organizational structure within the city to support that.
Right.
If not, we need to think hard about what we're putting forward and how it's going to be implemented, because that has to go somewhere, and is it us?
Yeah.
And all these reports are to be filed with the city clerk.
Yeah, so yeah, that was my thought. I think, Stephanie, your point's a very good one, that, asking someone like the mayor, as well as members or of the city council about these matters does raise the question of kind of, us being independent and being concerned about maintaining that independence. At the same time,
I would say, I mean, the board has multiple purposes. It's not necessarily just the watchdog. It's also, it was created to be a tool as guidance to help those offices. So I don't see why it would be bad to have, reach out to city council, reach out to the mayor and say, hey, what kind of interaction are you looking for us? It's just to be ethical. It's not necessarily just to be prosecutorial.
yes.
When we first organized, after Joan resigned as the chairman and Mary Jo was the chairman, she and I sat down with Bill Gaughan to try. None of us knew what our goal was, what our aim was. We asked for some guidance, and that was happening all when Mayor Cognetti was elected, and then this whole COVID thing happened. We never really got an answer from city council, and we never got to meet with the mayor. But we asked for some guidance because this, I guess, was all put together by city council, the ethics board.
Yep.
But we did not know what our specific duties really entailed.
Yeah, thank you. And that's, I mean, the thought is that we can talk to them and still maintain our independence.
Right.
In the sense that we can take back whatever information they give us, and we can process and follow up on it or act on it to the extent that we want to or not.
I think Mr. Gaughan wouldn't be a bad person right now, only because he's not running again. So he's kind of got
that was helpful. Yeah.
no skin in the game, basically.
Yeah. But also Brad's point about resources, we would need them to, if it's deemed necessary, we might be putting in requests for resources to help us, kind of ensure compliance with the code.
Because if you think of organizational management and flow, and what Attorney Hart just told it, like, we were created to address needs, basically. So part of those are saying, hey, office X, this needs to be happening within the city, within the council, whatever. Let's work together to make that happen. Because we're independent doesn't mean we aren't collaborative. It just means we go forward with a plan. And if we get pushback, that's when we can step away and say, like, okay, why are we getting pushback here? And we might need to readdress, but we want to be collaborative with these organizations and these departments.
Yeah.
I think we have to be.
Not isolated. Yeah.
Right.
Yeah. Well, good. I mean, I think, so do we need a motion on this? So we've kind of moved away, talking about issues related to the letter.
Oh, yeah.
We want to send out, bring it back to that. That's I suppose my job a little bit to kind of, Stephanie, do we need, I mean, I'm asking you, Stephanie, but I could ask anyone, or do we need a motion on the letter, or that might be helpful, I guess, this is the draft that we would use to distribute. Would that be wise to get a motion, a second, and a vote, or?
I think it would make sense because it would make it official.
Yeah. So can we?
I'll make a motion to accept the letter as drafted by board secretary.
Thank you. I will then call for a vote. All in favor of accepting the motion?
Aye.
Aye.
Anyone opposed? Nope. Motion carries. So there we have it. Thank you, Stephanie, again for your work on that. I think there's a final item would be an update on the website.
Before we move on to that item,
Mhm.
I assume that we'll just hold on the letter until after the date when the petitions could be challenged, so that we really know who the candidates are.
So you're asking about the procedure of kind of distribution of the letter.
Right.
Yeah. Is that what you recommend?
Or should every candidate get it that decides and thinks about running the files?
That's a question we should address.
I think it makes sense for it to be in the initial paperwork.
I would think so too. So everybody knows what they're.
Okay, well, there's something going into the initial candidate packet that everybody will get, whether they follow through with the petitions or not. The list of candidates that we'll receive will be a list of people who have actually filed petitions for city elected office. Is that the group that we should send the letter to?
Can I ask a clarifying? So the information contained in the letter is already in the preliminary paperwork too. The letter is kind of a reinforcement in highlighting these key points.
I'm not sure how much information, how much detail will be in that initial notice, but there will be a notice that there are requirements for running for city elected office.
Just to help me out here, Stephanie, as I'm new, is there a way that you at some point or somebody could share that what's in that initial packet and how that differs or is the same as the letter that we're considering here? Now, I probably can't do it now. I mean, I guess it would be, yeah. So then the idea, at least the way it's set up right now, is they do have an initial kind of flag, right, in that packet, and then this would be a more elaborate form once the people submit the petition. Yeah. So that might be okay. I would like to see it be. I think we could go. I mean, my thought is maybe we could go with that. What you're suggesting right now for this year, and we could potentially in subsequent kind of elections consider revising if this is not. What do other people think?
I think if I were running, I'd want to know from the get-go from day one, personally, but.
Yeah, I guess my hesitation with waiting is if it exists already, why not give it to them twice? If it,
Yeah, Stephanie, is there something logistically blocking or preventing this initial letter or this letter from going into the initial packet?
I'm sorry, going where?
Is there something blocking us from doing or preventing us from what Brad is suggesting?
I guess I'm not clear what Brad is suggesting. So the county is the resource for people running for office to get the initial materials and to get the petitions to circulate.
Yeah.
In that initial candidate packet, there will be information about the Scranton Code of Ethics requirements. When the petitions are filed, the
Yes.
county board, the county Department of Elections will give us a list of candidates running for elected city office.
Mhm.
And
So I
that's,
think Brad and Andy are suggesting putting this letter in that initial packet.
I'm not sure we'd be able to do that. I asked, and this was the plan that they provided us with. And I asked how would be the best way to distribute the letter, and they said that they would be happy to put some information in and then give us the names and we can send the letter.
So maybe this year we that makes sense. So they're doing their thing and we'll do our thing when it's over. And as we watch what happens this year, we can see what's in the information they share, because if it doesn't share what we think it needs to share, we can then engage in that conversation before the next election cycle. So yeah, okay, sorry. Yeah, that makes sense, Stephanie. Sorry, Mike. I think I was thinking there wasn't as much detail. We really just aren't sure what's in that letter yet because it's a separate entity coordinating that process, and they're partnering with us to be able to communicate afterwards. That makes sense. Sorry about that.
Oh, it's okay. I'm working through this too. And that's what I was suggesting, Stephanie, if we could find out what exactly is in that initial packet, that would be helpful. I don't know. I don't want to put the burden on you, but maybe it's difficult. But I'm just interested in finding that out. And then
I provided them with the document that we created that's posted on our website. And I'm not sure whether they're including that document or whether they're just including a note referencing that.
Yeah.
Since it is on our website.
Great. So, yeah, I would agree with the proposed. So once the petitions are filed and we know who is running, then we would then send this letter to them. That's correct, right? So that we would target those specific people that filed this. I think that's a good way to go for this year, and we can revisit or revise going forward. We have some more time to discuss and do this.
And we would only be doing this for municipal elections.
Yes.
So it only applies to people who are running for a Scranton elected office.
Yes.
And that doesn't happen every year.
Yeah. Do we need a motion on, I don't know if we need a motion, do we need a motion on that to the distribution plan? I think we could just go ahead, right?
I don't think so.
Distribute as we've agreed. So, great. Other things regarding this letter, Stephanie, or should we move on to
I think we can move on.
the website? Yeah.
Okay.
Mm-hmm.
Well, the city of Scranton has a very much needed update to the City of Scranton website. And initially I couldn't find us, but I was able to find us. We are under, I believe it's your government, and under your government, integrity and transparency, which is actually a good place for us to be. When I first looked at, it was just our names, basically, and the code of ethics. I did contact the person who put together the new website. She was very, very helpful. We now have all of our documents that were previously on our landing page. All of those documents are now posted on the new website.
Great.
So, and everything is up to date, except for the new position, the 5th board member, and that will be updated as soon as he's officially part of the board.
That's great. Thanks for checking that and catching those, Stephanie. That's awesome. Thank you for doing
Well,
that.
we put so much work into it last year that I was a little horrified initially when none of our documents were there, but they were very helpful and took care of it immediately. And the new website does look much better.
Mm-hmm. Excellent. Well, thank you, Stephanie. I echo Brad's comments. And thanks. Any questions or concerns about that matter, the website?
Stephanie, in order to add new items to the website, you have that contact now. We can just send things to that individual.
I do. I can send it out to everyone. I assume we can just send it to her.
Okay. I mean, I am looking at our site, so we do have the complaint form. I think it might also behoove the board to have like a form to request an advisory opinion.
Oh, that's
So
right.
city officials. So, I mean, I can go ahead and draft that. It would be very similar to our complaint form, at least with that information. Then, if it's easy for us to just be able to send it to that contact, that'd be great.
Okay. I also noticed on Reading's website that they have a form for requesting or a procedure for requesting advisory opinions. So you might want to check.
Okay. Yep. Great.
Anything else on the website? If not, then we would move to agenda item number 7, which is the future meeting schedule. At the very least, scheduling our next meeting, which we are looking in general to, it seems like there's a spot for us. It's open on the 3rd Wednesday of every month. There is a little potential hitch with March. That's St. Patrick's Day. We might be okay with that, but otherwise, I think that might be a good thing for us to do, is just to schedule a monthly meeting and have that spot, and that will, we can get our regular viewing audience connected with that. And then also, if it does turn out that we have no business before us, then we could just then cancel that meeting. If need be. We probably have to put a notice.
So we should have business just because of the complaint we have. They should have a report back by the basically beginning of March.
Yes, we will. We would have a report. As far as I know, right, Attorney Hart, we would have that. Yeah.
We wouldn't have a report. We would have just an update on the matter to see if it rose to the level of full investigation.
Yeah.
I don't know if you'd be interested in for next month, if you'd want to move it to the 2nd Wednesday, the 10th.
To try to, because of that update, because of St. Patrick's Day, perhaps. Yeah.
Yes.
Stephanie, is there a conflict with the 2nd Wednesday? Is that correct? With other city?
Yes, I think so. I think there's a conflict on the 2nd and the 4th.
Mm-hmm. Wednesdays of the month.
Yeah.
How do people feel? Is the 17th still acceptable, or should we try to find an alternative date for March?
It's acceptable to me.
Doesn't affect my world. Yeah, fine.
If we weren't in a pandemic, I'd have a problem.
So,
Nowhere to go.
Yeah.
all right. Okay, I think then it sounds like that our next meeting we can plan on 6 p.m. Wednesday, March 17th. And then we'll have an eye to all subsequent meetings, unless if there's exceptions, holidays, things like that, will be held on the 3rd Wednesday of each month.
So will we be advertising that we'll be meeting the 3rd Wednesday of the month?
I think that would be a good thing to, maybe with some kind of minor qualification, and think about language of, typically, usually, these, you have to think of the specific phrasing, but the general rule. Yes.
Yeah, the 3rd Wednesday of every month, unless otherwise notified.
Yeah, there we go.
Something like that. Because then you don't have to advertise, I don't believe as often.
Yep.
So,
Right.
Yeah, we just have maybe an advertisement when we don't have a meeting. Something like that. But yeah, that would be a good idea. So, okay. Is that resolved? Great. I don't believe we need a motion for that either. So.
No.
And I'm just wondering, we would be advertising now that we would be meeting virtually. And if we do have the opportunity to meet in person, we would probably have to change that.
Yeah, we can put out another advertisement once that we shift. Hopefully not the too distant future, but when we shift to in-person meetings. I think that's a good idea as well. So,
I'll type something into that and I'll forward it to all you guys just so you're approving it before I contact the Times with it for next month.
That'd be great, Andy. Thank you.
And then I recommend just making sure that it allows for public comment through that email no later than 2 days prior to the third Wednesday.
Well, actually, we've been saying 2 p.m. that afternoon.
Oh, okay.
And I've been checking it.
That's what Ed said, yeah.
Okay, well, that does perhaps transition us to what should be or would be the eighth point on added to the agenda, which would be public participation. Stephanie, I believe that we did not receive any email communication from the public.
That's correct. We did not receive any.
So I think given that, that takes care of, unless if I hear otherwise, agenda item number 8. And simply moves us to agenda item 9, which is adjournment. I think I need a motion for that. Can I get a motion to, unless if there's any other business that people want to bring before?
Make a motion to adjourn.
Okay, sounds good. Can I get a second? Can I get we got a second?
Yep.
All right, there we go. All in favor of adjourning?
Aye.
Aye. Okay. Any opposed? So the motion is carried. There we go. Will adjourn. Thank you very much for a productive meeting. And
good job running the meeting, Matt.
Yep. Thank you very much. And we'll see each other. I'm sure we'll be in email communication to some degree prior to this, but we'll see each other on Wednesday, March 17th at 6 p.m.
All right.
Perfect.
You all.
Take care.
Take
Bye,
care.
everybody.
Bye.
Be safe, everybody.